who was guarding the golden stool. And for those of you who don't know what the golden stool is, it is the stool that holds the spirit of the Ashanti people of Ghana. When the British were occupying Ghana, Gold Coast at that time, they used to arrest any chief, any king who was rebelling against occupation, and they would either kill them or exile them in Mauritius. In this particular case, one of the kings had been exiled in Mauritius. And the governor at that time, the British governor, wanted to take the golden stool to the United Kingdom. Now remember, the golden stool houses the spirit of the Ashanti people. And symbolically, by taking the golden stool to the United Kingdom, he would have virtually destroyed the spirit of the Ashanti. Yaa Asantewaa, as the gatekeeper, she had rumors that men had started negotiating with the British governor to see if the British could have the golden stool in exchange for the king who was in exile in Mauritius. Upon hearing that, Yaa Asantewaa became so incensed. Her speech, I am going to paraphrase. She said, "Is the bravery of the Ashanti men normal? If the Ashanti men cannot stand up to fight to defend the golden stool, she, Yaa Asantewaa, was going to gather her fellow female friends, sisters, and loved ones. And the women would rise, and the women would fight against the British till the last one of them is down to defend the golden stool." Yaa shamed the men, who then gathered together and fought to defend the golden stool. The golden stool remains in the Ashanti Kingdom today because of the position that was taken by one woman named Yaa Asantewaa. My fellow women, my fellow friends, the time is now. Our circumstances as African women could not be any worse. The exploitation of Africa has got to come to an end. Neo-colonization must come to an end. Colonization must come to an end. Imperialism must come to an end. Our men, if I can be blunt, have failed us. They have tolerated the most egregious abuses of Africa. Why do we continue to engage the British, the Germans, the French, all the European nations that colonized Africa as ministers of culture, knowing very well that they are housing stolen, priceless artifacts in their museums throughout Europe? Why would we entertain them, knowing very well that they still have remains of our ancestors who they murdered because they dared to stand up and defend their lands against occupation and colonization? To this day, those remains are still in jars, in basements throughout Europe, and yet the ministers of culture gladly go to Europe, engage these people in buildings where they know underneath the seats they're sitting on, the remains of our ancestors have been there in jars, and they say nothing about it. All we are asking is that the remains of our ancestors be brought back home to the individual African countries for proper burial. They don't want that. And we are not saying anything. I'm going to blame it on the men. Why is it that we know very well what the World Bank is doing, what IMF is doing? The reason there are uprisings in Kenya is because of what IMF was doing to Kenya. Africans are being given egregious interest rates for loans that have been paid 1 million times over, and our ministers of finance know that. Our Reserve Bank managers know that. Our heads of states know that. So why can't we mount a campaign to take a position and say enough is enough? Many African countries have never defaulted on their loan repayments. So therefore, why are they getting these huge interest rates on their loans? Economic Hitmen. I'd like to encourage all of you to read that book, Confessions of the Economic Hitmen. You'll understand how systematically they set out to abuse developing countries, of course, majority are African nations, giving them these frivolous loans, a project that should cost 5 million, they will rake up 30 million, most of that money going back to US companies, the multinationals that are working with the local governments to make sure that they siphon the money and pocket it for themselves. We know the games. We know what's happening. The question is, why are our men sitting back and doing nothing about it? I could go on and talk about the various ministries, talk about the things that are being done to Africa blatantly. Everybody knows. Even those in the industry, there's something called fear. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? If you love your children and you're in a position of power, you got to use that power to make a difference. When you are appointed as a leader to lead, be it a president of a country, a minister of a department, a head of a department, a director, you're a school teacher, you are over the school board, you can dissect it down to the family. When you are in a position of leadership, use that position of leadership to further the agenda for those who you represent. And sometimes we forget that. When I took on the mission as African Union Ambassador to the United States, I was acutely aware that my voice represented 1.4 billion people. And that when I shut up during meetings, 1.4 billion people would have shut up. That's not something I was willing to live with. My fellow sisters and brothers who believe in women, the time is now. Us women, once again, like Yaa Asantewaa, we must rise. And the men must understand that for us to take our rightful place on the world stage, sometimes they need to move over a little bit. And in the event that they choose not to move over, my suggestion to all of you, my fellow sisters, that we grab the chair and make our own seat at the table. We can no longer wait for them to give us a seat at the table. Either we work together as men and women and understand that when women lead, change happens. When women lead, change happens. It is just that simple, and everyone knows it. So it is time that if we do not get that opening, we are going to unite, and we will fight you men, and we will get those positions, because at the end of the day, we are fighting for you, we are fighting for our children, we are fighting for that which makes the essence of a country, and it starts with a family. So men, listen up. African Union has spoken. Gender parity 2025. Yes, African Union has done that. More than half of the commissioners at the African Union today are women. Thank you for that. But that's not good enough. That gender parity must extend to every parliament, every senate in Africa. Equal representation, if not more. I applaud President Kagame of Rwanda, because he has led the way. His cabinet, last I checked, was over 60% women and 40% in his Senate. That probably has gone up by now. We must push women into leadership. We must narrow that representation gap. There is no other alternative, and my sisters, failing to do so is not an option. So in any position that we are, let's speak up. Let's demand that we also need representation, because it is known, proven, guaranteed that when women lead, change happens. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired. How long are you men going to continue to oppress us? We appreciate that we have a culture, but I tell you, we must also change with the times. There are things we do now as women that are equal to men, and yet in some cases, we're still treated as second-class citizens. A woman doing the same job as the man gets paid more than the woman. That has got to stop. We're in 2024. We're looking forward to having a female president of the United States. How exciting is that? Well, now, my fellow Africans, we also need to increase the number of female heads of states in Africa. For when women lead, change happens. At every level, let's empower our young women. Yes, we must stay within the norms of our cultures, but we must also let them understand that cultures evolve, and our men must accept us as equals. For we are equally capable, and in some cases, I would like to say we are better qualified and more capable than the men. But I'll leave that for a conversation for another day. Our ancestors, when they met in Addis Ababa, our Pan-African leaders in 1964, to talk about an Africa that was united, an Africa that spoke with one voice, an Africa that had a single currency, an Africa that had a single monetary policy, an Africa with a single army. That vision failed simply because when they went to Addis Ababa, they were united. They were not united up, excuse me. They were two groups, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. 7 countries, Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, were the Casablanca group. They said Africa for the Africans and African Union now. The Monrovia group were 35. That were the rest of the countries. They said, well, let's kind of hold off on this unity thing. Let's kind of slow down a little bit. Let's take it easy. Let's take it slow. So because they were the majority, they won. So we ended up with an Africa that we have today. Year in, year out, the idea of a united Africa that is united, speaking with one voice, was tabled, and year in and year out, we failed. To this day, of those objectives that we were looking forward to, the objectives that our Pan-African fathers met and had hoped for to accomplish in 1964, we've only accomplished one, which is the trade. 3 years ago, we saw the signing of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But even that is a tall order. It's implementation. How many of you, my brothers and sisters, know how to get a contract through the African Continental Free Trade Area? I can assure you none. Because the contracts, again, are going to those who have exploited us. We are now organized as a trading bloc, as Africa trading bloc. We're now organized as an Africa that's going to go to the world stage as one united African continent. Guess what the problem is? Those who are going to take advantage of our continent, we have organized and now we are handing them Africa on a silver platter. The majority of the people getting the contracts through the African Continental Free Trade Area are from the Middle East. They're from Europe. They're from India. They're from China. And a few are from the United States. The United States is a little bit slow in getting into the game. But the bottom line is the Africans are nowhere to be found. So we thought they exploited us during colonization. With the African Continental Free Trade Area, if we do not jump in and get involved, if we do not jump in and understand the intricacies of this humongous, gigantic process, once again, we will be turning over our Africa on a silver platter, and this time on a high-speed train of exploiting and siphoning all our natural resources flat out of Africa. Do you want that, my sisters? I know the answer is no. As a grandmother of 7, a very happy, proud one, a mother of 5, I know I would like to sit back before I go down to my grave. Let my granddaughter know, 20 years from now, that yes, my dear granddaughter, there were issues with women in Africa. There were issues in Africa, and we did something about it. My brothers and sisters, we got together, and this is what we did to do something about what is wrong with our Africa. And this is where we would have left, and this is where they need to pick up. The question is, are we doing that which it takes to prepare and pave the way so our children can continue this struggle? For we know the struggle for our survival as Africans, the struggle for our survival as women is a long journey. We're not going to finish that business in our generation, but we must leave the path, a very clear path for our children, so they too can pick up the torch and continue the journey till we make it to the promised land. Being a woman on earth is not an easy thing, particularly a Black woman. We are the underdog. We are Black, we're female. It doesn't get any worse than that. And yet, we still see the likes of Kamala Harris, and still we rise. Let's keep our chins up. Let's remember that we cannot give up. It is not easy, but mission will still be accomplished. As women, we can never tire. We have a responsibility for the family. We appreciate men who allow us to also sit at the table with them. We appreciate men like Dr. Alicia Atai, who also understand the importance of women and are doing everything they can. So yes, it's not every man, but I like to put them in a big group because the majority of them are in leadership roles, and the majority of them are occupying those boardroom tables. And each and every one of them, if they could speak up, our circumstances could change, but they choose to be afraid and be quiet. So yes, we need more Dr. Alicia Atai. We need more men like him to speak up and understand the role of women, not only in governance, but also in their daily lives. As women, my message to men in leadership in Africa is that if you don't see it fit to pave the way for us, guess what? We are paving our own way. So get out of the way if you don't think women belong in the boardroom tables. For we, the African women, are coming no matter what. Victory is ours. Failure is simply not an option. As a grandmother, I am determined, and I know I speak for millions of grandmothers out there as well. I am going to do everything I can to make this world a better place for my granddaughter and many generations to come. Thank you, Dr. Atai, for putting this event together. We appreciate you and your leadership. Keep up the great work, the work of women in leadership and paving the way for representation at every level in leadership by women. That is a must. We appreciate you for taking this message across the world so men can take a moment to think about us. I thank you.
Now, after that direct moment, Excellency, thank you so much, Ma. We are so grateful. That is one speech for the record books, and I know that it's being recorded. I don't know, I'm going to need a copy of that speech because we need to share that. The world needs to hear everything that she's talked about. She said something that really hit me. I am a huge advocate for men. I love our men because I know that they are underrepresented as well. There's so many issues our men are dealing with. But she said something. If you're not going to help us get where we need to get to, today is all about our women, so I'm really excited. I'm pumped. Come